I think when politicians take extreme positions, um, they have to be called on it, right? They have to be called on it, and I think saying it is one thing, doing it is another. And the problem I have with either side using this heated rhetoric is there are people that are followers that will take that lead and behave accordingly. Take Democrats now who are saying he's a threat to democracy and he's had 2 assassination attempts. Both sides need to tone down the rhetoric because there are enough unstable people out there that will take that as license to advance an agenda that I think is dangerous.
Dr. Phil recently appeared on the Young Turks, sitting down with Kasparian and Cenk Uygur, and things quickly escalated, especially between Cenk and Dr. Phil. From the get-go, Dr. Phil wasn't holding back, directly calling out their reckless rhetoric. It was obvious that Cenk wasn't prepared for such a confrontation, as Dr. Phil dismantled several of his key points, particularly when it came to the dangers of inflammatory speech and its real-world impact. What's even more intriguing is how Dr. Phil's stance seems to have shifted in recent months. About 6 months ago, he started making appearances on shows like The View and Real Time with Bill Maher, where he tackled woke narratives head-on with a much more assertive approach. It left me wondering, has Dr. Phil always held these views, or is he reacting to the changing tides of public opinion? Is this a genuine shift, or is he simply adapting to the current climate? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. During the debate, Dr. Phil raised a critical point about the extreme rhetoric often used in the media, particularly on platforms like the Young Turks. He emphasized the dangerous consequences of heated language, pointing out that there are unstable individuals who might take such rhetoric as a call to action. This is a serious issue, and Dr. Phil didn't hesitate to hold Cenk and Anna accountable. He made it clear that both sides of the political spectrum need to tone things down before the situation spirals even further out of control. Let's get into it.
Here, I'll give you an example. So I'm atheist now, but I'm born Muslim, my family's Muslim, my background's Muslim. So Trump says, I want a total and complete shutdown on Muslims entering the country during the 2016 campaign, right? Put aside the travel ban he eventually did. I don't need to get into the policy of that, but he says that, right? And then his fans say, yes, we should ban all Muslims from the country. Now, how am I supposed to react to that? Am I supposed to say, well, I love you as a human being. Yeah, go ahead and ban me, right? Like I can't say that. They're forcing me into a fight. Do you see what I'm saying? So what does somebody do in a situation like that where it gets real hard?
You know, I think obviously that is an extreme, unrealistic and sustainable position. And I think when politicians take extreme positions, they have to be called on it, right? They have to be called on it. And I think saying it is one thing, doing it is another. And the problem I have with either side using this heated rhetoric is there are people that are followers that will take that lead and behave accordingly. Like, for example, in 21 years, I have never said, if you've got a child and they're running into traffic, I've never even said you should suppress the behavior by just swatting them and saying, no, don't do that. Which I would never even say that. And half the country is spare the rod, spoil the child, and half of the country is you don't spank your children. And I can't say you wouldn't even spank their hand if they were getting ready to touch a hot stove. And I'll tell you why. Because there are enough mouth breathers out there in the country that would take what I said and say, well, Dr. Phil says it's okay to hit your kids. And they would abuse their children, taking what I said out of context, amplifying it, and using it as justification to abuse their children. Now, you take someone like a leader who says something like you're talking about, you get these mouth breathers out there who all of a sudden they take that as license to aggress against Muslims. Or you take Democrats now who are saying he's a threat to democracy and he's had 2 assassination attempts. Both sides need to tone down the rhetoric because there are enough unstable people out there that will take that as license to advance an agenda that I think is dangerous. I think both sides keep amplifying the rhetoric and need to stop doing that.
This is a serious issue that Dr. Phil is bringing up, and it's a major problem within the woke left. You could see that Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur weren't comfortable hearing it. When someone like Dr. Phil addresses the dangerous rhetoric that many on the woke left, particularly on the Young Turks, engage in, it forces them to confront the reality of their words. Taking responsibility for extreme rhetoric is difficult, especially when it's clear that there are people out there who will take that rhetoric to the extreme. We're seeing the consequences of this with the assassination attempts on Donald Trump. Yet, people like those on The View, Cenk Uygur, and other left-wing figures are hesitant to acknowledge their role in creating a charged atmosphere. They won't own up to the fact that their rhetoric may contribute to real-world violence. I do believe Anna Kasparian is starting to show more common sense lately. She might be one of the few on the left who would admit that they need to take responsibility for contributing to such a toxic environment. But I doubt Cenk Uygur would ever do the same. Most on the woke left won't admit that they've played a part in this. Dr. Phil is making the point that everyone has a role in the current political climate, particularly the woke left. If you agree that what's happening now, including the attempts on Trump's life, is dangerous, then you also have to agree that Cenk Uygur and others play a part in escalating things. And that's a fact. Let me know in the comments if you agree.
So how do you suggest, I totally hear what you're saying. How do you suggest people like us do our jobs, right? So like when we talk about what happened in 2020 and 2021, when we talk about the fake elector scheme, January 6th, I mean, that was an attempt to assault our democracy. And I think it's important to report the truth without unnecessary language to rile people up. But right now, I think one of the problems I'm having is that people are trying to argue that simply discussing the reality of what happened following the 2020 election is literally putting Donald Trump's life at risk. And I don't believe that to be true.
Well, I don't either.
Yeah.
I don't either, but there is heated rhetoric that I think could contribute to these unhooked people out there.
Like calling Trump Hitler over and over again, stuff like that.
Mean, then you get somebody that takes that and acts on it. That's not the responsibility of the Democratic Party. That's the responsibility of the person that picked up the rifle and got on the roof and took the shots. That's not the responsibility. But we, as broadcasters and political leaders, need to recognize, hey, people, that's why I say don't spank your children. I recognize there are those out there that will overreact to that. We have to be responsible. If I'm reporting a show about suicide, I never show how they did it. I never show the memorial services because there are responsible ways to report those things so you don't have a contagion effect with some teen who says, oh, I wish they'd have that kind of thing for me. And so there is a demonstrated contagion effect. So I refuse to show that. I won't show how it happened because would I be responsible for somebody killing themselves? No, but I am aware of the contagion effect, and so I have to be a responsible broadcaster.
Yeah, so another thing we agree on, a good transition to media, and because with the shooters, after the first day, we never say their names anymore because they're partly doing it for the attention, right?
I never say their names.
Even the most famous ones, I say the shooter in Charleston, right? I say the church shooter, the El Paso shooter, et cetera. I never say their names because that's half the reason they're doing it, in my opinion. So there's a way to be responsible.
When Anna Kasparian asked Dr. Phil how they should do their jobs, The answer is pretty simple, at least to me. Maybe it's not obvious to everyone else, but what Anna is asking is clear. Stop being so hyperbolic. I understand they're not directly saying, hey, let's go out and commit an assassination on Donald Trump. I have to be careful with my words here, but they never explicitly say that. However, when you repeatedly say things like, this guy is evil, he's racist, he's sexually assaulted people, he's a threat to democracy, if he gets elected, the country will never be the same. He's going to overthrow the government. All these blatant lies. What do you think is going to happen? We have unstable individuals all over this country. We see it in tragic events like school shootings and similar incidents. There are more lunatics out there than we want to believe. So when you spread those lies, whether it's on the Young Turks between Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur, on The View with Whoopi Goldberg, or on Bill Maher's show and others, of course, something is bound to happen. The answer to Anna's question is pretty straightforward. Stop lying and stop exaggerating everything, especially when it comes to Donald Trump and people like him. It's that simple. Now, I have to disagree with Dr. Phil when he says it's not the responsibility of leftist media. I don't know about you guys, but I disagree. It's not solely their responsibility, of course. The person still has to make the choice to act. But the media plays a role in creating the climate, and they need to take responsibility for that. You can call out issues without making veiled suggestions like, somebody has to do something about this guy. They may not be explicitly calling for violence, but what do they think people are going to take from that? It's dangerous, and they need to be more accountable. As for Cenk's claim that they don't reveal certain names or information, let's be real. You'll never say their names unless it's a straight white male Republican voter. Then you'll say their name over and over again. That's the sad reality of the situation. Let me know in the comments what you think about Dr. Phil going on the Young Turks and confronting Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur about their dangerous rhetoric, especially given the multiple assassination attempts on a former and possibly future president. Despite all this, they still won't take responsibility. Let me know your thoughts on the whole Dr. Phil versus Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur situation